Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Ma'aser Sheni, Perek Dalet, Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Lamed Hey, and we left off on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph all the way mamish on top of the Amid, and we just came off the machlokes between, interestingly, Rabbi and Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara first relates to us that when Rabbi would send food gifts to his chaver Antoninus, who, according to one understanding in the Gemara of Avodah Zarah, Pashut became a ger in private, and therefore he was also obligated to have tithed foods. So when you send someone who has to keep kosher food, you got to send them kosher food. So when he would send him very expensive kishuyim, because he sent them kishuyim in the beginning of the season, where only the early ripening kishuyins were ready, whether kishuyin are cucumbers or it's some sort of gourd, whatever a kishuyin is. So the Gemara tells us that first, Rebbe, because of his own chumrah, would not separate from a pile of kishuyin its proper percentage for trumas u'maisres, but he would actually separate from every kishuyin. We're speaking now about Ma'aser Sheni in it, for it. He used to declare that the 10% near the uketz should be designated as Ma'aser Sheni. Then he wouldn't send those gourds or those cucumbers to Antoninus because Antoninus has to keep kosher. He was going to eat it in Tiberia. He was not going to go to Yerushalmi. So Rebbe himself would redeem it for him. But here Rebbe allowed for himself a gavaldik leniency. What did Rebbe do? Rebbe made believe as if the Ma'aser Sheni 10% in each kishuyin was actually chatuchais, was detached. And my friend, 10% that's detached from the remaining of any vegetable has less value than the same 10% while it still is attached. Generally, attached produce remains fresher longer or for many other reasons. So Rebbe valued ki'ilu hein chatuchais, to which when Rabbi Yochanan heard about that practice, Rabbi Yochanan challenged and says that's inaccurate. And he gave the great example of two partners, that when two partners own something together, one cannot actually force the other to physically cut the item in half, right? You have a beged, imagine. Okay, we're partners. Well, we're dividing the partnership. I'm going to take half, you're going to take half. You can't cut the garment in half. You have to sell it, and then its value is divided in half. So the same thing has to be that when you evaluate 10% of a vegetable or of a produce, you are not allowed to evaluate it ki'ilu hein chatuchais. This is where we left off at the end of last year. And on top of Daf Lamed Hey, the Gemara is going to confirm Shitas Rabbi Yochanan, as we will see. Going on from there, we'll have today a classic example of why I think up until the recent history, many did not learn Yerushalmi because it was almost impossible, because there were different girsais, and we didn't yet make a consensus. What's the right version? And we're going to have a liner, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and the difference between whatever it is that he said in its words is going to be min hakotza el hakotza. It's crazy making. I mean, generally, it's going to appear that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is allowing us to give us an inaccurate amount of money for Ma'aser Sheni. That would make it flow more with this entire sugya, beginning with the Mishnah. It's not, again, we're speaking about, number one, you have to give Shava b'Shava. Number one, even though that the Gemara is speaking, the Gemara was after the Churban Abayis. And like I said, nowadays, halachically, we don't have to give the value of money for the Ma'aser Sheni when we redeem it. We don't do it that way. We redeem Ma'aser Sheni on a pruta. How much Ma'aser Sheni? $1 billion can be redeemed on a pruta, and then the pruta is thrown to Yam HaMelech because we are not allowed to eat it prior to the building of the Mizbeach's last Beis HaMikdash. In our Gemara, again, it's going to appear that even Bisman HaGolos, they needed to make a redemption, Shava b'Shava, but there were many leniencies. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, it sounds like he's giving some sort of leniency, a very limited leniency of that you are allowed to give an inaccurate value. But again, depending on the girsa, it's going to be like min hakotza el hakotza. We're going to learn the Marafulda, and we're going to learn the Rashirilio, and you'll see what I'm saying. And then we're going to go through the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to refer today back to the Mishnah, where we say that when you redeem Ma'aser Sheni, you can give its money according to its inexpensive rate. Poidim maser sheni kishar hazoil. And when we learned the Mishnah, we explained that to mean that you can pay its wholesale value, not its retail value, which is substantially different. The Gemara will quote two Amirayim that's really limit that ruling. And they say that's only true if you have access to the wholesale price. You meaning the person who's doing the redemption. If you don't have access to wholesale, which is, by the way, in most cases, I don't know if most cases, in many cases, we don't know how to buy it wholesale. Today, if every person would buy it wholesale, and then the halacha would change. To me, it appears that the next statements we'll have in the Gemara don't apply it so limited. They understand that all of us are allowed to give the wholesale price. By the way, so paskins the Rambam. So you have to know how to learn the Gemara here. It's very cryptic. What's really going on over here? We're going to have different halachas in which the Gemara will tell us that you can really give the inexpensive price. Just to give you an example, at the end of a season, or when it's very hot. It's interesting. There was no refrigeration then. During the heart of summer, during the time in middle of the day, all of the vendors of vegetables at some point would lower the prices because they knew that if people don't buy it right now, it's probably going to go off from the heat. So if you do the redemption at that time, even though you're not on the market, you're in your home, you can make use of that very inexpensive rate, all based on the Mishnah's ruling, Ma'aser Sheni, Poiden Oisoi, Kishar Hazol. Basically, the bottom line is that we're going to see that we are allowed, it appears, lechatchila, to find ways to give a very low price for the redemption of Ma'aser Sheni. Perhaps, I'm saying, all of that is because even Rabbi wrote the Mishnah after the Mizbeach was no longer standing. Again, today, we don't give the right value. We give one pruta for $1 million. Not even if, clearly our Gemara doesn't follow that opinion. The Amoraim are talking. By Tanoim, you don't know, even though the Mishnah was compiled, was redacted after the Churban Abayis, but Mishnayos will learn, since the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, a Mishnah Rishonah lo yizazim im kaima. But from the Gemara, it appears that they were giving a price somewhere near reality. But maybe because of the fact that ultimately the money was going to be destroyed. There's nothing you can do with it. They allowed themselves to use the most inexpensive rate. Or even Bisman Habayis. Again, you have to know how to learn the Mishnah here. We are following a mahalach that even when you have to give Shava b'Shava, the Mishnah says, Ma'aser Sheni Poiden Oisek Kishar Hazoil, and the Gemara Kedarke B'Kodesh is really expanding that and showing you all different types of scenarios where there's an expensive rate, a very inexpensive rate because of certain circumstances. And as long as you're doing the redemption at that time, that's the way everyone explains the Gemara, you will always be allowed to use the current very inexpensive rate. That is Daf Lamed Hey, and let's go inside. And we're going to start all the way on top again. Lamed Hey, all the way on the top. The Kahada is to back up Shitas Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, the Amoira, but Rabbi Yochanan argues with Rabbi. Rabbi, you were wrong in allowing yourself to redeem the gift that you were sending to Antoninus by making believe on the kishuyin ki'ilu hein chatuchos. At kedei kach, you're not allowed to do, because partners cannot cut vegetables prior to dividing their estate. Okay, I'm looking down over here because we have a little technical issue with the mic. God willing, we'll fix it tomorrow. Okay, so says the Gemara, Kahada, and this will actually confirm with the following. Now, even greater, you can say, with Rabbi Yochanan arguing with Rabbi, Rabbi's son argued with his father. And this is the story that Rab Shimon the son of Rabbi, Have Mefaked would instruct. Now, even though the Gemara doesn't say now whom, but you'll see in 2 lines, he instructed Bar Kapara regarding Al Ilen Diroimaya, regarding those Jews that lived in the south. We said whenever the Gemara speaks about south, it means south of Tiberia. That Yidden, in that part of the Holy Land, Tahava Mizalzelinba, they would cheapen Ma'aser Sheni. And exactly how would they cheapen it? Like we just mentioned above, which would mean, actually, they didn't make believe as if. You know what they did? They actually took the Ma'aser Sheni, Forget about if they separated Meiser Sheni from every cucumber for itself, or if they just took one cucumber for 10, one gourd for 10. Doesn't matter. When they had the Meiser Sheni and they're not going to eat it in Yerushalmi, Rab Shimon ben Rebbe, Bar Kapara, because they couldn't, because there was no Mizbeach. You know what they would do prior to redeeming it? Again, they didn't hold that you can redeem it on a pruta. They felt you have to redeem it shava b'shava. But you can make it inexpensive. How would you make vegetables inexpensive, Aviv? Chop them up. They would cut up the vegetable. Cut up vegetables being sold in the market is cheap, cheaper than whole vegetables. And then they would redeem it. Again, it just makes sense to me because you can't do anything with the money anyways.
Nowadays, you pay double for cut up.
Huh?
I'm saying, nowadays, you pay double for cut up.
Yakir is saying a good word. That nowadays, ironically, you pay more. I would say why? Because today you have refrigeration. Today, there's a certain amount of laziness that never existed from when God created the world. You put these two things together, you pay more money. It's amazing. So what did he do? So Rab Shimon ben Rebbe didn't like that. He felt that's too much. You're kidding? You're cutting it up. So Nasta in Bar Kapara, what did he tell Bar Kapara to do? To put them in their place. Bar Kapara went and vekarteta kumai, and he sliced all of the vegetables into very small pieces. That's the way the Marafulda says. In other words, what you're doing shtick, you're ruining God's part. Go into their homes. Look at the aggression that they had. Go into the guy who went to the house. You couldn't just admonish. You took the 90% of their vegetables and you didn't just cut it up. You diced it up. Yakir is saying that's gavaldik. They got rewarded for the misbehavior because now they had someone working for them. Where do we have that? We have that by Kalayim, right? That shloshim that they used to go, Beis Din used to go, and when they would find people having their fields, having climb in the fields, right? At some point, Beis Din would uproot the entire field. But then they realized people wanted that. Instead of having to plow, leave some kalayim, let the Beis Din go, and that's the joke. A guy was, anyways. Vekarta kumai and Amar. I'm going to skip the joke. Page 92. Amar, and he told Bar Kapara on the instruction of Rab Shimon ben Rebbe, told him, Tavu klum. Yeah, is it any good now? You're happy that I cut up your vegetables? No, you're not. So if you're not happy, why do you think God is happy? It's too much to cut it up. Now, does it mamish prove Rabbi Yechanan? Well, to a certain degree. Don't forget, the Rebbe didn't cut anything up. But the fact that Rebbe allowed himself to redeem the 10% near the uketz, ki'ilu hein chatuchos, here we see from the story that how you can only do ki'ilu hein chatuchos if you are allowed to cut it. So then we say, kol haroyi ki'ilu. But if you're not allowed to do it, then how can you do ki'ilu chatuchos? His son is going against. That's what I was saying. It goes from an Amoira arguing into his son, into Rab Shimon. Okay, weiter. Says the Gemara, At kedoin mila. Okay, I got it. I accept it. I accept that you cannot follow Rebbe and give the evaluation ki'ilu hein chatuchos when you have a vegetable that gets devalued when you cut it, which is most vegetables, but it's not all vegetables. And especially, Yakir, to you, nowadays, maybe no vegetables, maybe all vegetables. You can package it, you put plastic on it, whatever they do to poison it more. All of our vegetables, they last forever because it's fake. Just a good simon. In Brazil, the milk never soured. Can you imagine? Is araya? It's not milk. I mean, there must be that way. At kedoin mila mikarta tava. All of these words in the Gemara is gavaldik for those vegetables that if you are mekarta ta it, if you slice it, velotava, it's not good. You ruin it. You devalue it. But the Gemara wonders, but mila mekarta tava. What about those vegetables whose market value does not change even after you cut it? Are you allowed to cut it before you redeem it? The Gemara asks the question. And the way the Marafulda 12 lines from the top of the Amid, you see that at kedoin hashas makshem. It's after we brought a story that backed up Rabbi Yechanan, we finished. That's it. We sided already with Rabbi Yechanan. But now the Gemara is asking, Ad kan, all of the above is davar sheniskalkel b'chatichos suda asur, something that gets ruined. Aval davar she'enim miskalkel b'kach, but if there are vegetables that don't get ruined if you cut it, elad rabba. Yakir, nimkar chatuch v'loy shalom. It's sold, sliced. if it doesn't get ruined, if it doesn't decompose, if it doesn't rot quicker because you cut it, yeah, people were always lazy. So people sell it sliced. And v'loy nifshat. And the Gemara doesn't answer. Kedarke b'kodesh in the Yerushalmi. Says the Mara Fulda v'hakar l'chumra. I don't know where he got that from. I'll tell you why I'm asking at him. Stam, because this entire daf today is all going to show you all of the leniencies that you can do when it comes to Ma'aser Sheni. Fakert, maybe the pshat in the Gemara is the Gemara has a kasha. The Gemara doesn't answer. From the spirit of the sugya of Ma'aser Sheni, Poidin Kishar Hazoil, I would argue you can hakar lokula. Maybe. It's not relevant anyways, my friends, because today we redeem it on a Shava Pruta. Unless this kasha was even Bisman Abayis, which is now, when Mashiach is coming, we're rebuilding the temple. Finally, Chavre, the Am Shanova Rebbe says you can go to Harabayis. It's changing. Just a long time in them, of course. It's a mitzvah. It's a chiyuv. The more you think about it, to me, it's crazy making. That Fruma Yidden should be the ones saying that Torah should not be kept. It's unbelievable. The Torah was only for certain times. It echoes of something terrible. Torah, like Tchelis, like the Torah is Torah. You got to keep the mitzvahs. If you can't, I got it. The Rambam who holds that you're chayiv kares, the Rambam who is the one that says kedusha rishayna kitchel l'shayta v'la'kitchel l'salavik, right? The Ravid says that the Ravid used to say sometimes that a Baskoil would come into his beis medrash whenever he argued with the Rambam to confirm that he's right. The Rambam, who's the most chamer, the Rambam went to Harabayis and he did the obligation. There's a mitzvah to go there, meaning there is an obligation to go there. He bowed down there. So this is Tafshin Peivav. I can tell you that every Fruma Yid is going to go there. Then you think about it, that we went to the Holy Land how many times, and we never went to visit God's home? You know what kind of chutzpah that is? You think about it that way. It's very irritating for me. All right. Now, here we go. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Omar. Now, what did he say? You're going to see different girsois. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Omar, ain't played in Ma'aser Sheni. Elo, now, one version, the version that the Ois V'Hadar decided is the right version. Ella at shloishim v'shisha b'shivyoy. Unless the difference in amounts is less than a 36th. What does that mean? Unless it's less. Now, even here, there's the marafulda. And then let's go something that I don't think if we ever learned. Look in whoever has the left side, you have ha'ares maharafulda. In other words, the Marafulda wrote a brief version that's printed in the place of Rashi. What merit he had, I don't know. Don't forget that the Rashi is the elder here. You would think the elder should go. Maybe it just didn't fit. Maybe the Rashi wrote too many words. I don't know what cheshbon, but the Hashgacha Pratis. And then the Marafulda wrote notes. And Lishna Achrina, you guys, you see that? So Lishna Achrina, that Ma'aser Sheni sheshava lamed vav prutas, if it's worth 36 prutas. Again, this is Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. So this is even when there's no temple. Then you have to give 36 prutas. No, you can't give less than its value. But why did he mention that it's 36? You can't give 35. What the Marafulda is saying, but what happens if I have food, Aviv, that's worth 37 prutas? And I only want to give 36 prutas. That I am allowed to do. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is giving a leniency. According to the Maraful, the leniency is as long as you're giving less than a 36th of its value, you can get away with it. Why are you doing it then? Because there's nothing you can do with it. You can't eat it when there's no temple. And actually, there's something called Toisvis Marafulda. It explains that where did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi get it, according to this girsa, is because the word biyadecha that's written, right? V'nosata kesef biyadcha gematria lamed vav. If you get excited with gematrias, you should go see a doctor. I don't see the greatest excitement. People are like, oh, gematria. Okay, that's a side note. Now, the Rashi has a complete different understanding. And look at his gears. It's in the right column, 4 lines from the bottom. Yakir picked up his eyebrows. Yeah, like gematria means geometry, and we're so off and everything. And we make from a nothing a big deal, and we think we're okay. At shloishim v'shloisha b'shavim meya. Whole different version. Rabbi Shua ben Levi is saying you don't have to give shava b'shava anymore, l'chayda, because you can't eat it. How much of a discounted price could you give, Mordechai? A third. What's a third of 100?
Who's saying that?
The Rashirilio's version in the Gemara. Look in the Rashirilio, 4 lines from the bottom, that for every 100's worth, what's a third of 100? Aviv, alo, 33.333. You can give a third. If you have $100 worth of Ma'aser Sheni, at shloishim v'shloisha b'shavi meya. Pshom Levi Sfidale, the Bizmanenu, says the Rashirilio. Meaning now that you can't eat Ma'aser Sheni anyways. You don't have to give shava b'shava. You chaylim lifdoise b'pachos midmav. But not the way we do it. We give mamash or nothing. We give a pruta. Avol, I hope this mic is not driving people crazy on the Chabad.org. Avol ein poichasin mipidyoinoi ella at shava meya b'shloishim v'shloisha. That means you can take off 2/3. You can discount 66%. Shnei shlishim pachus. V'leisli hegdish shava mana shichila yashava pruta mechulal. 1 second. Why? Just to know, why do we paskin? Because you're not hearing. You're hearing it from a different mic. Why is it that we paskin that if you give a pruta for $1 million, it's okay to redeem Ma'aser Sheni? Because we paskin that by hegdish, generally, if you give a pruta for something that shava 100 b'di'eved, you are mechalal it. But Rabbi Shua ben Levi doesn't agree with that. In other words, the source all comes from how are you paid the hegdish. A b'di'eved of hegdish could be done lechatchila by Ma'aser Sheni because you can't eat it anyways. Makes sense. We're living in a b'di'evedic time. But since Rabbi Shua ben Levi argues with the mana, with a shava pruta for a meya mana, so therefore, what could you do by hegdish? The minimum that you can give is a third. So by Ma'aser Sheni, the minimum a third. Now look at the difference between the Rashirilio and the Mara and a third or 1/37th. Either or. At least both of them are going in the same mahalach that Rabbi Shua ben Levi is giving a certain leniency. It's not clear what is his leniency. It doesn't have to be mamish the same. It can be a third. It can be if you have 37 prutas, you can give only a couple. Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. Either Amar or Ve'amar Abchizkiya. That was Zeshu Mechalel. If a person is deconsecrating Ma'aser Sheni, Lo Yehe Mechalel al Chatzi Pruta. If you live in a time where there is a coin that's worth a half of a pruta, Aviv, in what time is there a coin worth a half of a pruta? In our dimes. What's the smallest American coin? A penny. It's a minted coin. I don't know how much a pruta is worth. For sure, more than a penny. Could be even a nickel. I know that now. Someone told me they stopped minting pennies. That's Trump. But they're minting, I think, nickels. I think you can Google it. I think a pruta is more than a nickel. Now, all based on the fact that silver is so valuable because it's a percent of it. If it was 3 cents, so then it's 6 cents. So the point is that we had before now, even though we learned in a Braisa, the Gemara quoted the Braisa, that you could be Mechalal Ma'aser Sheni on a asimon, which is on a unminted coin. But our Mishnah does not subscribe to that. Our Mishnah says that Ma'aser Sheni cannot be exchanged for Shava Kesef. Well, for Shava Kesef, food, yes. But money is Vitzarta, a coin that has a tsura on it, a minted coin. So now Rab Chizkiya is telling you a chiddush, l'chumra, that even if there is a minted coin from the government, if it's not worth a pruta, it's like a asimon. It's like a unminted coin. So Kavan is writing that Machloikus in Google, which is just a compilation, it's either 6 cents to a dime. A nickel is less than a pruta. It's good to know that. Okay. So you know what you can be, you can say, well, it's a minted coin. Nish good. Looking for my mic. Lo yemechalal chatzi pruta, shelo yehe kim mechalal ala simon, ela at shava pruta. In other words, the coin has to have the value at least of a pruta. Chavra, it's late, let's get moving. Now, the Mishnah said, that's the big leniency of the Mishnah, that when you redeem Ma'aser Sheni, poidin Ma'aser Sheni, kishar hazoil. And when we learned the Mishnah, we explained what is shar hazoil, literally the inexpensive rate. Inexpensive rate means you get to pay wholesale price. Now, Amar Ravimi says Ravimi that Kamo Olal Kumei Rabbi Yochanan v'Rab Shimon ben Lakish. How many people would come and ask a shaila, and they would always share the following psak, that this psak substantially limited our Mishnah. What was their psak? Right, wholesale price is simple. Wholesale price. The Inun Amri, they would tell. Whenever this happened many times, and they would say, "Hold on, don't find out wholesale." Puk va'ashlam kehadein tana'ah. Go and apply your practice like the Braisa says, kahado tana'ah, not the way the Mishnah says. Big chiddush. Normally we pass like the Mishnah. Don't allow yourself just to give wholesale. What does the Braisa say? This is what the Braisa says. Poidin ma'aseh sheni b'shas hazoil v'loi b'shas hayoiker. B'shas hayoiker, the way that Rashi interprets, is not every time do people have access to wholesale prices. I'll give you a mashal. Here in LA, if you want to buy perfume and pay wholesale gray market, anyone can go downtown and pay that. Anyone. That is a good mashal, that even though that when you go into a proper store, you're going to pay your retail, since you have access to the wholesale price, then even the Braisa says, in other words, everyone has the words of the Mishnah. This is what God told Moshe Rabbeinu. Ma'aseh sheni poidin moisem kashar hazoil. But that only is when you can get it for a cheap price. If you don't have access to the wholesale price, which, by the way, for many, many items, maybe even for most items, the truth is, I don't know. I don't know that much commerce, right? I know flowers. You pay on Pico for flowers $100. You'll pay for the same thing probably $10 downtown.
Yeah, but like, let's say for food, you can only shop at Restaurant Depot if you have a number that shows that you have a store.
So perhaps to Danny, to the Gabbai, that if I have that card for Wholesale Depot, for Restaurant Depot, means if I have access to it, then I can say Kishar Hazoil. That was the spirit of what they're saying. If you don't have how to pay the cheaper price, you cannot go find out wholesale price. It's almost like saying, well, why should I find out wholesale price? I have a kasha. Why don't I find out how much it's worth in China? That's not the meaning of the Mishnah. Now, the way I understand the Gemara, others disagreed with Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, even though it's very hard to disagree with them. They both agreed. Very rare that they both said the same thing. And we'll see how this plays out. What the Rashi is shocked with is that, like I just said, when you have Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish agreeing, that should be the psak of the Rambam. The Rambam doesn't pass on that way. Let's read the Rashi. I know it's getting late. It's in the left column, third line. That kama zimni olole kume Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish kama pa'amim echnasti limedrash Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish v'ho yodanin, and they were paskening. When I walked into the Beis HaMedrash, which is into the Beis Din, they would actually be paskening. Lemi shabalafana. People came to them. And they asked them a shayla, Rebbe, what do I do with my ma'aser sheni? This is bisman that you can't eat it. V'shamati yoem nemloi, and I heard, say v'shalom mois, go and pay. But they told him, not like the Mishnah, but kahai tana, the savar, the dafke b'shar hazoel misharam lekichas achenveni. This is the key, in the brackets. The harbe loikchen mimakem shechenvin loikeyach. If everyone, or many people, most people have access to buy it where the chenveni buys it from. In other words, the people have access to wholesale. Then they can pay the cheaper price. Aval b'shar hayoiker, which means if the amcha don't have access to it, the hakol loikchem menachem, people can only buy this item at a store. Then misharim kamoish achem leimoicher. So that was a big chumrah. Says the Rashi vehatema. Now I wonder on the Rambam zal shapas like the perik dalat halacha yudches kestam mishnah seinu. How can that be? How can that be? He doesn't say because of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, because when the Gemara quotes a story, I actually witnessed that people came into their basin, and that's how they pass, and that's called a Ma'aser Rav. The Kaimelon b'chol duchti Ma'aser Rav. Ma'aser Rav. Okay. And maybe to answer, I remember I was learning this Gemara yesterday. It's going to be, to me, it became clear later that other Amoraim disagreed with him. Maybe that's why we don't pass on like them. And maybe the fact, that Rabbi Yochanan, who compiled, wrote the following sugyas after he wrote this, to give value to that. Let's go right. Now, the Mishnah gave two examples of paying a less expensive price. Either kumois shehachenvini loikeach v'loi kumois shu moicher, clear, you get to pay the wholesale price, which is what the chenveni pays, and not the retail price, which is the price that the chenveni sells. That's one way of applying poidin ma'aseh kishar hazoil. And then the Mishnah gave another example. And I just want to remind everyone that even outside Yerushalmi, if you want to exchange copper coins on silver coins, you can do that. So let's go to that. Just the numbers that we just gave the example. If you are going to take copper coins and you want to buy one, you want to take 25 smaller coins to buy a seller. So when you go to a money changer, let me just tell you how it works. You're going to have to give him 25 to get a seller, if that would be the case. Whenever that's the exchange rate, it doesn't go in the other direction. If you have a seller and you go to the money changer and you say, can you change it for me? That's how they made money. They would only give you 24. I'm just giving a bad mashal because really we know it's 768. So again, in other words, what you give and what you get is not the same. So the Mishnah is saying, same thing. If I have 20 plus copper coins and I want to exchange it onto a silver coin, I am allowed to give 25 for a seller, which is good for me. I can be machalal more copper coins. We're not machmer. We don't tell a person, ooh, you only go 24 to a seller, because if you go to a money changer, he would only give you 24. You're trying to buy the 24 lechulin. You're trying to buy the copper lechulin. Normally, you would not have the upper hand. You do have the upper hand. You give all of the 25. That's what the Mishnah says. Okay, so now says the Gemara, daf lamed hamid beis. At kedoin davar meruba. This is our premise. Why are you allowed to get away with, like I gave an example, you get to keep 25 prutas lechulin, because it's not noticeable when you are making a relatively large exchange, money on money, food on money. If you use the shar hazoil, people don't notice it that readily because there is a lot. But what were to happen is, Gemara is asking, if you're making a very small exchange, it's a very small amount of food, or if it's a very small amount of money, there people will notice that you're giving the lesser price. Maybe there is like a maras ayin zilzul. Sa'at kedoin, the Gemara is wondering, when you have a davar meruba, look inside the top marafulda, she'ein zilzuloi nikar kol kach. When the amounts are larger, you don't notice. Or even if you notice, in business, once it's big numbers, everyone who buys, many times they argue, I'm buying so much, give me a discount. It's not uncommon that when there's a very large turnover, you get a better price. But what would happen? Then what? Maybe when it's more nikad, maybe you should not be allowed. And the Gemara responds, no, I feel okay. Because that's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah does not qualify. Or like the other example the Mishnah gave when you're going from money to money, that you get to redeem more prutois lechulin, not less. You can always be lenient, even when it's a davar muat, even if it's nikar. And I would argue because there's no zilzul, perhaps not bisman abayis, perhaps all because anyways you're losing it. So even though again our sugya does not allow you to be paided on a pruta, our Gemara doesn't even allow you to go like Rabbi Shua ben Levi, give a third, deduct 1/37th, but at least get the cheapest price that you could. And let's go weiter. Now, how many people are needed to make the evaluation? The Mishnah made a rule, and that is that eshadam of Yuduim, that an item that has a known market value, you only have to have one. If there is no market value, the example the Mishnah gave was what happens, Mordechai, when food begins to go off. It's very difficult to evaluate it. It's fluid. That's the word in English. It's not fixed. Like even in grade B, Mistama, there's grade BA, there's grade BB. You have all these madregas. For that, you have to have 3 experts. That's what the Mishnah said. Eshadam of Yuduyin. What the Gemara now is going to point out is that even when you have an item that has a known market value and you only need to have one, that one has to be a mumcha. And if that one turns out not to be a mumcha, you're not bound in his ruling. B'chlal by Rabbanim, you ask a shaila, you can't go shaila shopping. And even if you could, once you ask the shaila, you want to know the din, and someone told you the din, it's definitely not ethical for you to go ask someone else. I'm saying that if you ask someone theoretically, you want to know the sugya, that's not a problem. Then you're coming to learn Torah, even though you want to manipulate. But if you're asking the Rav Shaila, then you ask a Shaila. Here, you're not asking a Rav Shaila, you're asking a evaluator a Shaila. The point the Gemara is going to make is that if after you asked him, it becomes known that that person is not an expert, even if it became known because he gave you the wrong answer, you're not bound with what he said. Doesn't matter that he gave you a number. He doesn't know what he's not a mumcha. That's what the Gemara is saying. And stories, Agada to Yerushalmi style. Stories about Piskei Dinim. Says the Gemara, Rav Nachman bar Yaakov, Machavei Choitol Nagora. Rav Nachman bar Yaakov, who had dates. Now this is, I don't understand why. The word Nagora means a craftsman, right? A carpenter. Now, right now, he needs to ask an expert on dates. So the way they said is, happened to be that in his neighborhood, the one who was an Agara was the expert on dates. I don't know why we have to mention that he was an Agara. But that's what happened. He would ask that Nagara, who was a Mumcha, Umefarek Alpume. He didn't ask three people, because that person, as the Mishnah ruled, Es Shadamav Yuduyin, you only need to rely on one person. Another story, Maiserav, to show you that we follow the Mishnah, that Rabbi Yanai Machave Roi Vachitem Lechi Toy Na'a, he would have a quarter of a kav of wheat of Meiser Sheni, and he's going to redeem it, needing to know what is its value. So again, he would ask one mumcha, Umefarek Alpume. But let's go to the other side. Same in the other side. We can say Pshita, 1 second. Rab Simon, Chave Peden Lerebi Chilkiah, he felt that Rab Chilkiah was the expert. But Amalei, Rab Chilkiah told him a value that was later discovered to be Bishav Ehen, the retail value. Now I'm going to go the way I understand the Gemara. According to Rabbi Yechanan and Ish Lakish, even though the Mishnah says that you are allowed to pay Shar HaZoil, they said, that's only if you have access to it. Or the way that Rasharilio says, most people have access to it. I would argue that what happened over here is that Rab Simon and the majority of the people did not have access to Shar HaZoil. They did not have access. Based on the psak of Rab Shimon and Resh Lakish and Rabbi Yechanan, even though again we're paskening like a brisa against a Mishnah, yes, they did. So he gave them b'shaveyan. Rab Simon, the way I understand, argues with Rabbi Yechanan and Resh Lakish. He holds, no, we follow the Mishnah that if there is a wholesale value, you get to pay. Anyone gets to pay the wholesale. And the very fact that Rab Chilkiah, the big mumcha, he was a mumcha in market values, but it doesn't mean he knew the halacha. In other words, just because you get to pay the wholesale price, and Rab Simon didn't want to obey his psak, but he asked the shaila. So Amalei, so Rab Simon tells Rab Chilkiah, Kein Omar Rebbe. Let's go with that version, and listen to what he told him. Ein poidin meiser sheni al pi hashoitin. Mikan Rabbi Shachat Shlita. He found it in the Gemara. In other words, you bist hashoita. I don't have to follow you. Yeah.
After he consulted him.
After he consulted him, because he didn't lie. But l'choira, I think that's why the Rambam at the end of everything doesn't paskin like Rabbi Yechanan and Ish Lakish, because from the Gemara that approach is called a shoitedik approach. Everyone can pay the wholesale. Another story. Now Pinchas Chavi paid this is not so bad, because Goyrasa means an expert in beans, not a Rebbe Chilkiah. And here again, Amar Le B'Shavein, he was stuck a big mumcha, how much the value of beans are, but he did not give him the wholesale price. And then Rav Pinchas found that to be wrong. I am allowed to give the wholesale price. Amalei hachin amer. Now, Rab Chilkiah b'shem Rab Simon. This is the funniest part of the story. What did you see? Normally, people like us, we would get insulted. Rab Chilkiah learned. Rab Chilkia going forward quoted Rab Simon that says, "Ein poidin ma'aser sheni al pi shoitin." How funny is that? So he became part of the Messiah. That's no shoita.
Shame Rabbi Simon.
Because Rab Simon told it to him. Where do you have this? Galik. How funny it is? No, Rab Simon was the one that gave it to him. Rabbi says, "Ein poidin al pi shoitin." Oh, now Rab Chilkia had a new Torah. Omar Rab Chilkia, Omar Rab B'Shem Rab Simon. Ein poidin al pi shoitin. Says the Gemara. Okay, let's go to the Shar Hazoil. Let's find moments where there is a very inexpensive price. For example, Amar Rebbe Shammai, Mordechai Shammai of the Mishnah is not this Rebbe Shammai. Who is greater? Shammai is greater. Why is he greater? Because no title. Whenever you hear people call your father without Rabbi, that's a compliment. That's because he's greater. When they call the old Zajac Rabbi, that's the insult. It's the opposite. Amar Rabbi Shammai, Kama Barnash boy, that how much do you think people ask for vegetables? B'tihara tohoira, look at the Gemara. B'tihara tohoira tkufas chamus. In the hottest time of summer, right? High noon summer. Basar balone masik lizurai. You know what time? Not stam, midday. Maybe, I don't know when the hottest time is. I don't know if you can say midday. But you know how when people knew it's the hottest time of the day? When the bathhouse attendants, that they had all of these towels. We're going to have a mikvah. We're going to have this headache. Ooh, are we buying a commercial dryer? You have no idea. I'm not talking about to get out the smell, but then you have to dry the towels. So they would know exactly when to put out the towels because they wanted it to dry ASAP. You leave it, I know this from Brazil, there was no dryers when I grew up. When you leave something in the sun for too long, you know what happens to the item? It becomes very hard. It becomes hard. So today you put bounce, today they put poison. Today with poison, everything, people die, they get cancer, but they live, but they die in comfort. Exactly. So there was no bounce. So when you see the balanim putting out the towels, you know it's hot. People that are selling vegetables in the market during that time, they sell it for peanuts. You get to pay that inexpensive price. Umatia pritin umefirkene. At that time, redeem it for a very little amount of money. But that's the key. You can't do it the whole day. During the time we're in the market, vegetables, what the Ma'aser Sheni is very inexpensive because it's that hot, even though you're not in the marketplace. You are in your air-conditioned hut. Someone was fanning it. Whatever they had there. Okay, it says similar. Amar Rav Yirmiyah, Kama Barnash boy.
Wait, is he saying that you can only redeem it at that time?
Only,
at
but
that price?
yeah, but that's even that's a
morning,
leniency.
you can't say, oh,
The morning guy cannot say it, but even
say, oh, I'm gonna
in other words, he's telling you a very big thing. When you want to redeem your Ma'aser Sheni, wait until let's say it's 1 p.m. Danny is saying 3 p.m. I don't know when sometimes it gets hotter later. Whenever that time is, now redeem it. Wait, and then you'll get to give less money. No one is looking to cut corners. This was being ruined. Again, it's shava b'shava. And now add Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Take that price. Let's say you can give a third. Give a third. We're trying to figure out how to give the least money to be ruined as possible. Amar Rav Yirmi, another example where at certain times things get very inexpensive. Kamaboy Barnash, you know how much, you look at the price that people would pay. Look at this example. Ba'arvusa b'fesei ramsa. Erev Shabbos, late afternoon, farmers, what do they do with the produce? If you are in the food business, there's one thing. In the shmata business, what can you do with it? My father says you can't eat it. People in the food business, if you don't sell it, you get to eat it. So all of these farmers, nothing lasted over a Shabbos Sunday. What did they do with what they didn't sell? They brought it home. Who would sell it? Their wives would sell it to the neighbors. But what happens if the wife is preparing her hair for Shabbos? She doesn't want to be bothered with selling it. That's the time where you get the cheapest price. They want to get rid of you. So he's saying that if you go out of Shabbos, that menashia kolon, from the time that women are already braiding up their hair, they're blow drying their sheitel, look over Shabbos. That's a good, but that's today. Umavet alein. All right? And in other words, no one is buying. They already were miyayish. No one is selling. If you go to them at that moment, they'll sell it to you for the biggest discount. At that time, if you go, if you're going to go out of your way, you're going to go into their home and you're going to shout, hello, can I put a dime and take the bag? They'll say, get out of here. Yes, good. So umaise pritin umefarkine. At that time, redeem it for that price. And the last line, Amar Rabbi Yudan bar Gadia, that Rabbi Yaakov bar Bun manichin olav achi yichmoishu. He had a better idea. He waited for the Ma'aser Sheni to start withering. Look at that. That's the biggest chiddush. Daf Lamed Vav. And then, not only did he, so it's withering already before Shabbos. It's already going into. Poida oisen moitzoi Shabbos miyad. It's amazing that the least demand for produce was Matzah Shabbos. Today, people are sick. After Shabbos, they have to eat pizza. It's a machla. Most people, after Shabbos, they're full. And if they're hungry, there's leftovers. So the hardest time to sell was Matzah Shabbos. So he first would let the produce go into its beginning to go from grade A to grade B. Right? Grade B is what's in grade A in Glattmart. And then wait until Matzah Shabbos. Matzah Shabbos, if someone were to buy it, since no one wants to buy, they sell it for cheap. Then redeem it. All different solutions of being allowed to give the minimum amount of money, which is going to be thrown liyam hamela.